Alright, so everyone, so today I'm going to show you how to make a mid-tempo track here. I have a track with about 3 different drops or so, and I'm just going to highlight on some of the important info to keep in mind while you're making a mid-tempo track. So this is going to be a bit of an updated video because I swear I've done this video like 8 times, but I feel like I'm a little bit better now, and yeah, let's get rolling, right? I'm going to play the 3 drops for you now. Here's the first drop. Here's the second drop. And here's the third drop. Alright, so we're going to get started here with the drop because I always make my drops first because, you know, it's the most fun part, right? Yeah, so let's break down the drops and the elements in the drops. So, starting off here, the drums. The drums here are super basic. I like to keep them relatively basic, especially for mid-tempo, because I like to keep a little bit of emphasis on the basses here, right? So, important thing, I like my very hard yet short kicks here, right? So, you know, like that's a fucking thumpy kick. We like that. To do that, I just do like a drum bust on here. See, without it, not dope. With it, dope, right? We got a little snare action here. Just classic dubstep snare. Nice. We got a ride here as well. Then at the end of my 4 bars here, we got a little bit of a drum fill, right? To help things kind of bring, just kind of bring things back around, right? So. Right, and then after a few bars here, I'll add in some like hi-hats, you know, something like this. You know, I threw a little phaser flanger thing on here. Sounds pretty neat. You know, nice and wide. Adds a little bit, you know, more depth to the drop. But yeah, that's really all for the drums. Super basic drums. And yeah, on that, I was talking about why I like the kicks short. So a big thing about mid-tempo here is the sidechain. I didn't really understand this greatly at first when I first started producing, but if you listen to any 1788L's tracks, his kicks really kick and his basses really bass, right? So the way he does that is he has these really aggressive sidechain curves here, and I recommend using like a utility or something because like with a compressor, it's kind of hard to get this shape, especially, you know, using a kick to trigger. But yeah, I just threw a utility on, shaped it so I can see it. So I like to have my visual here, and it's a super aggressive cut. So I have all kick and then all bass. See, I can kind of draw a line up, and it's sidechaining the whole kick, right? Not just a little bit, the whole kick, right? So we're getting that really nice heavy kick and then the really nice heavy bass. So on that, yeah, that's really all the basics there for the drums. And then we gotta move on to the basses. So most mid-tempo tracks here, bass-wise, they're really gritty, right? Really gritty basses. And the way to obtain that is, I'll just kind of show you this patch here. We go into Serum. It's a pretty basic patch if you look at it. And let me just take off the 3 post effects here. And you hear that. Any producer, even if you're starting out, I'd say you could probably make this sound, right? Pretty basic, right? So all I'm going to do is I'm going to throw on like a hyper dimension, makes it a tad bit wider. Then, most importantly, a bit of a distortion, right? And nice little compressor action. So that kind of brings it up. Some slight saturation, some OTT, and you know, we're cutting off around 100 hertz. And that's what we're going to do for all the basses, because especially with these really gritty, distorted, wide basses, the sub on those is going to be really kind of weird, out of phase because of the width. So I always recommend doing a bit of a dedicated sub with all the basses here. So what I'll usually do is I'll group every bass but the sub, just cut that out at 100 hertz, because even if I'm doing this, I'm adding a bit of gain at the end, which is still going to bring some of those sub 100 hertz frequencies out and still dirty up my mix a bit. So I'll usually cut, you know, that separately, or just group that and then cut that. And then, yeah, it's all really about layering here. And, you know, the base layering isn't that crazy at this point here. We just have this nice, you know, dirty pluck on top of a nice little sub. So yeah, then this just leaves us with this, right? And you can hear how the kick really punches through, and so does the basses, right? So that's why I always recommend that aggressive sidechain. And then if you look at most mid-tempo drops, there's always a sustain. I'm not gonna say always, but usually there's a sustain that hits on the one, right? So it's gonna be, you know, sustain, then sustain, right? And that's just the basic way to lay out your drop here. And this follows the same pattern, right? We got a sub here, then, you know, a sustain, distorted high and sustain. Then we got a bit of it like distorted white noise. And that layered just a nice little sustain hit. Then followed by, you know, our pluck, right? So it's not really all that complex. You know, once you get the sound design right, then it's all about arrangement. And on the arrangement part, if you're ever working off the grid or you're a bit of a newer producer, most drops, especially most EDM drops, most mid-tempo or dubstep drops are around 4 bars here. And a good way to see this in Ableton, you can just highlight. In the bottom left there, you can see the duration going up. Once you see that lay on 4 right there, that's our nice little 4 bars. So we're going to repeat every 4 bars. So I have like a starting point marker here and an ending point marker here. So that kind of keeps things a little bit more cohesive and kind of keeps you contained and like, okay, a drop's going to be here and it's going to repeat here. So you can see my last bar is a bit of like a transitioning out point, if you will. So like, then back in, right? And really all else I had this little high-end stab just because I needed a little bit more color in this drop. And yeah, that just right. So anyway, that sounds pretty sick. It's basically really basic layout, you know, put in some fills, you know, our sustains, and you know, it's not all that many patches here. So yeah, then we can kind of take a look at these other drops really quick. It's really just the same principle here. It's just a different layout. We're using basically the same patches here. We have a little bit of a phaser slash flangered one on top layered with this. Then, you know, our pluck's gonna sound like this. Then obviously with our sub as well. And we're just chopping up our plucks along with our, you know, sustains here. Right? And it's really not that many patches, as I said. And then on our third drop here, it's really the same thing as well. We just added a bit of a vowel bass here. Just kind of chop that in there as well, right? So you know, with our separate sub, because always like our subs, right? We like our subs clean. So anyway, yeah, pretty basic and simplistic there, and only the really processing I'm doing on most of these, it's all really the same. If you look, it's usually just a saturator, an OTT, and an EQ, right? Usually just cutting out around 100 hertz. You don't need to go super crazy on the post-processing if you get a relatively cool sound out of Serum. And yeah, then you kind of got your sound design taken care of there. All right, so once you made your drop, we're gonna need a bit of a build, right? I'll show you a super easy way to make a build that just works perfectly with any drop, right? So let's say I need a build for this drop, right? So I'm gonna grab every single patch that's in this drop right here. I'm missing a few. I'm gonna grab all these. Let's just select them, hit Control D. And it's going to pop down, and I'm going to have every patch here. And I like to change the color a bit. so I know which ones are in the build and which ones I'm going to use for which ones I'm going to use in the build and which ones that are in the drop, right? So these are the same patches, the same layout, the same pattern, everything that's in the drop, right? But I just downgraded it, right? I added some reverb, I turned the level down like -7, and I like took out a bunch of volume for the subs and whatever. I basically just made like the drop basses for like one of my tracks like a year ago, right? I just want to take everything that sounded really good and make it sound kind of shitty, right? Because we don't want the drop energy in the build, right? But we still want kind of some of that, like a little teasing action, right? You want people to have some anticipation, some predictability, right? So I grouped that, and then we got so they kind of know what's coming, right? Of not giving them everything. But yeah, anyway, using the elements that are in the drop for the build, you're basically guaranteeing that you're going to have predictability, and then it's just really up to you to downgrade that, because I don't want to go in here and play all these basses in the build at the same level and everything, the same power, the same goodness as what's going in the drop, right? Then you're just kind of spoiling it, right? You just kind of want to tickle that shit in a little bit, right? So that's why it's just kind of, you know, reverbed out, kind of down a few dB, and that's basically just, in my opinion, just the best cheat code there to make a good bit of a build, right? You're showing them what's coming, but you're not giving them what's coming, if you know what I mean. So yeah, anyway, we got a nice little build here. Right, and you can use this method for basically any genre, EDM wise. You always hear it in dubstep, you go to any festival, they always have that, 4 bar pre-drop of the basses before the drop. You listen to Tear Out, they play, their thing before the kick, right? It's basically always used throughout EDM, so just using this simple trick almost guarantees you a nice little drop, because you always need that sense of predictability there. Why did I just open FL Studio? Yeah, anywho, that's kind of how I formulate my mid-tempo drops, and that's kind of just a few tips kind of thrown in there as well of things I kind of wish I knew when I was first starting out on mid-tempo. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I may be able to answer them. I am not a professional yet, but anywho, yeah, that's how I make my mid-tempo. Hope you enjoyed. Hopefully, bless. Hopefully it's cut down to a reasonable time so it's not wasting your time to watch. And yeah, dope. Subscribe. Yes.